Think about applying it.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Ken Weinberg. Ken is a senior technical communicator and training developer for Oracle. He's been a Toastmaster for 20 years, is that right?
Yes.
He doesn't look old enough, does he? And recently, Ken started a new club in Markham. He is also a volunteer leader of the Editors Association of Canada. Please join me in welcoming Ken Weinberg from Speakability to Readability.
Thanks for that introduction. The focus of today's workshop is to help writers and editors improve the readability of the documents that they work on using plain language principles. Ever heard of those, plain language principles? Since we're all Toastmasters, we should be familiar with the communication medium known as public speaking. That is a very rich communications medium. It has the words, of course, but it also has the gestures and the vocal variety and the facial expressions and the eye contact. Very rich. Sometimes the audience provides speakers with feedback, so you'll see nodding of heads, laughing, smiling. Occasionally you'll see snoring or drooping eyelids. It's feedback nonetheless, but it's not the greatest feedback. Now, since you're attending this workshop about the written word, you probably know that the written word is not as rich a communications medium as the spoken word. We don't get as many channels of communication in that. Therefore, it's extremely important that the written word be as clear as possible to the reader. It doesn't matter if it's clear to the writer, it has to be clear to the reader. That's what readability is all about. If it suffers from poor readability, the reader might not understand, might not learn, might not be able to do something important. And this is why readability has become such an issue. Writing has to be careful, very careful, about avoiding the stumbling blocks to readability. And today you'll learn about those stumbling blocks. You'll learn to identify them, but better yet, you'll learn to fix them. So you're going to get some skills out of this class. Many people, maybe even you, think that their writing is perfect. And it doesn't need to be fixed. Well, sadly, most of these people are mistaken. Where do most professionals get and hone their writing skills? At university. They learn to write academically, or the academia way. Does that make them good writers?
No.
It depends what you mean by good. Right? Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and readability is in the mind of the reader. So you have to be concerned about the reader. Something written according to academic standards, and I use that term academic standards, is not considered highly readable by the average person. We didn't learn plain language in academia. This is a wave that started about 20 years ago with a really big push in the US government, and it's starting to catch on very seriously among us. Now, there's more to editing than just plain language principles. Do we have any professional editors or editors in the crowd? No? Editing is something that we often get called on to do, and there's some skills in this class to help you with the plain language part of editing. I'm a professional editor, and on a plain day, there's plain language for it, on a good day, which is better than a plain day, I am thrilled that I get paid to read stuff and to learn stuff, and I'm learning all the time. On a bad day, I am overwhelmed by how much I don't know. You know, I compare it to like playing a video game, and not that I play a lot of video games, but you get to a certain level and you think, wow, I'm really good. I really know my stuff. And then you get to the next level, and oh, it's a humbling experience. And you discover that this whole new level of stuff that you didn't even realize existed. Just when you thought you knew everything, you realize you don't. And I don't think I'll ever reach that ultimate level, and that's fine with me because I like the learning part of being an editor. And I like the fact that language is evolving, and there's so many ways to put a sentence together. If you ask 3 editors to edit something, you'll get 3 different versions. And that's okay, because English comes from so many different languages, and the rules aren't cast in stone. There is no official English police. They're going to crack down on you for doing too many commas, although I can't pick up anything now without reading it and looking for a mistake. So this workshop will not teach you to be a professional editor, unfortunately. Each of you have a brochure from the Editors Association of Canada. Please read it if you want to know more about becoming a professional editor. And see if you can find any mistakes in it. Believe me, we've tried. And boy, if you find one, you get an honorary membership. In the next 40 minutes, we'll learn 8 readability problems commonly found in writing, and you'll learn the techniques that you can use to fix them. I'll help you learn the techniques with examples and exercises. Yes, I said exercises. You are going to have to work in this workshop. So keep your handout, or as I call it, your workbook handy, because you're going to need it. Do you not have, anyone not have a workbook? Are there any seats with workbooks on them that aren't being sat in, unfortunately? There's a couple there. So, by the end of this workshop, you'll know exactly what to do if somebody hands you a manuscript and says, "Can you please have a look at this for me? My partner says that it's not easy to read." Ever had that? So our time is very limited, so I want to get started, and we'll get started with a remote mouse that might work. Or not. It does. Shorten sentences. Step number 1. How do you think your attention span differs from someone, say, 600 years ago? 400 years ago? Today's attention spans demand shorter sentences. And mouses that work. Oh, wants to. Maybe we should. That's all I got this week. It'll be a workshop without technical problems. Exactly. I'll have to stand right. Okay, in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the average length of a sentence, that's in 1387, was 80 words. Yikes. That's why you don't like reading it. Plus the pages crumble in your hands as you turn. By the time Shakespeare wrote his plays around 1600, the average sentence length in Elizabethan English had dropped to about 40 words. And today you'll see that sentences typically, for readability purposes, are down to about 20 words. So if you're looking at sentence length, you just count a few sentences and average them, and you'll see if your sentences are too long. If you're reading academic or corporate prose, unfortunately, they have not yet realized that the reader no longer has the patience for long, long sentences. They fear that if they write simply, their superiors just will underestimate them, and their peers will not take them seriously. So, when you're applying step 1 to your text, simply check the length of your sentences. That seems like a pretty simple thing to do. And treat any sentence longer than 20 words as a calculated risk. So here's what you do. You look at the sentence and you see what the central or main idea is. You'll find each sentence should have a main idea. Now, if you're looking for a place to break up this long sentence, look for linking words. Editors know what fanboys are. Fanboys are the conjunctions that you often find sticking a whole bunch of sentences and clauses together. So, F is for for, A is for and, nor or not, but, or, yet, and so. Fanboys. Find the fanboys, you can find a place to start a new sentence, right? Okay, another clue is the presence of commas and dashes and periods and parentheses. It's a clue. You might leave them in there, and we'll show you a couple sentences that benefit from a comma. You don't want to break it all up. Ernest Hemingway style. It's not what you're after. Conditions. If you see an if-because formation in a sentence, if this and 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 this, because this and this and this and this and this and this, this is a place for you to look at. So cutting back. All right. So we need to get a little practice going here. Oh, let's try back again. All right. So sentence. Most Canadians see the CPP as a safety net. They rely on it to provide additional income in retirement. Others do not agree and save for their retirement. Okay. That is not a bad writing, but it's a little choppy. Many Canadians say safety net, they rely on retirement, others don't need retirement. You can put more in a sentence and it won't hurt it. Let's try that. So a comma might help. You know, now you've got safety net relying on it, but others disagree. Look at that. There's something at the end that creates a suspense, so you want to read more. So it doesn't always have to be short sentences, and I wouldn't encourage you to make every sentence as short as possible. But the best way to learn is practice. So get out your workbook, and I want you to take a look. It's exercise number 1. And there's a bunch of text in there, and I'll give you a minute, and while you're looking at it, see if you can shorten it. Put some periods in there. Cut out some conjunctions. Give you 60 seconds. Yes?
That last one you showed us up here, that little short sentence at the end started with but. Are there rules that tell you not to do that sort of thing, or does it really matter?
It might be a good place to start a new sentence. I like but.
Okay.
You can start a sentence with but. You can use the fanboys to start a sentence. Oops. But it's not a great idea.
As long as it's understandable.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. You see a lot of them in a row. See, it's nice to have a few long sentences, but not all. It's dulling. Could be. Oh, yeah. Let's try. Okay, that's a minute, and I know it's not enough time, but let's look at what I have. So we ended the first sentence at pump, because there was a conjunction and. It can be a significant one when world events threaten supply. There's another conjunction, perfect place to start a new sentence. And since we're talking about a progression of time, then, so we've got some time travel. Crude oil prices, there's a but, good place to start another sentence. And then you've got a comparison. Other factors, good idea. Now, here is a bunch of stuff that's separated by commas. In a lot of cases, bullet list. Yeah. Right? I would suggest a bullet list. And then at the end you have the closing sentence. It had a while, but now since it's a new sentence, it's a meanwhile, because we're pulling the two things together at the same time, and we can even break that before the conjunction. So there's a lot of ways to take long text and make it shorter. Now, we move on to step number 2, where we're taking out the trash. You'll see there's a great deal of cutting that can take place in sentences. You don't always have to leave every word in there like it's gospel. Every writer uses some unnecessary words. I know they struggled and agonized over them when they put them on the page, but if you go through and take them out like I'm suggesting, they probably won't even notice. Because they just fill their text, and don't we fill our speeches, with words and phrases like with respect to, and for the purpose of, and in the event that. They fill in time, they fill in space, you can live without them. They're the equivalent of verbal tics. Now, you get to flesh out the utterances of those when you speak or when you're reading your writing for editing. You can spot a meaningless phrase in a sentence that looks something like this. So if you saw on the basis of, you could scratch that out and replace it with what? I'll give you a few to get you going in here. Based on. Based on. You don't have to put the whole thing in. To a large extent. To a large extent. is easily said as largely. How about in the neighborhood of? In the neighborhood of Leslie and the 407. Near, locally, approximately. What if it's near? You could say approximately, so you could say this conference is in the neighborhood of $200. It's approximately $200. Forget the in the neighborhood of. It's too wordy. For the reason that. Because you love that, don't you? You can get rid of those for the purpose of. For the purpose of, you could say for, you could say to, for the purpose of learning public speaking, or for public speaking, for the purpose of knocking him in the head, to knock him in the head. You know, there's, all right, so you get the idea. There's a bunch that we can do. Now, at this point in time, I already gave you away the answer. Now, I give away the answer. Can't do that. At the end of the day, you seen this in anything or heard this anywhere? When is that end of the day? It's at the end of the day. It's at the end of the day. It's fine. Finally, we get to the end of the day. All right. If you see these 4 in writing, basically, as you know, just to say that, what I'm asking you is, white out? White out. They're gone. Okay. Take out the trash. I want you to look through this exercise 3 in your workbook and go to town with your red pen. Finished yet? No, just kidding. We're so used to seeing them, we're changing our mind now. We're thinking, where are they? Get them out. You're looking for the bad. Skip the good. Is this fun?
Makes me cringe.
You've done a few so far. You found a couple. All right, the rest of yours for fun and excitement on your own. Here's what I would do. I would take out, given the current conditions. Did you get that? Yeah. Okay. I would take, I would break a sentence here, because you got a nice place to break a sentence. And how they are to believe is wordy. Just how to believe. With a view to is like in. It's very nice to be able to, I don't know if that's clear, and I apologize. To a large extent, or to a very large extent. Go. Take it out. Hopefully you're not paid by the word. Lawyers are. You'll see this in legal writing. Not infrequently. Okay, if you're really sorry to take out not infrequently, you could just say rarely or sometimes. But I would say it's fine without. And did anybody here catch the redundancy? Human mortality? There isn't anything other than human mortality. It's got to be human. Okay. So you've learned how to take out the trash by looking for these really unnecessary phrases. You have increased the readability of your document dramatically. If that's all the time you have to do, shorten the sentences and take out the trash, you've improved the document considerably. If they give you more time, great. Let's go to step number 3, hunting down the negatives. The human mind has trouble comprehending negation. Every negative forces the reader to go through 2 mental steps. They have to understand the word, then they have to understand the opposite of the word. You put 2 negatives in a sentence, they don't cancel each other out. They make it 4 times harder to understand. Put 3 negatives in a sentence, it's like Olympic gymnastics. But of course, nobody ever puts 2 negatives in a sentence. Or do they? If you come across writing that has un, in, non, anti, not, that doesn't mean you just eliminate them, but circle them. Go through the manuscript, just circle them all, and then go back later and see if there's any other way to word that. You know what I suggest you do if you see a lot of these? You're waiting for the animation now, aren't you? Yeah. So you don't want to let a negative go through without consideration. You should always consider, do I have to have this? Is there a positive way to say this and make this document more readable? I certainly think you can. So if you get good at catching phrases like this, then you won't mind seeing them in newspapers. It is not to say that we do not regard having bought a house when we moved to London. Ouch. See, they think it's funny. If you fail to pass the test, you will not qualify for the position. I think I understand what that means, but I'm not sure. You're just trying to tell me I can't have the position? The procedure will not be ineffective. It's likely, but there's a better way to say it. And you know the one that really hurts? It's not that I don't love you. Check, please. All right, so exercise number 4. Can you word any of the negatives in this exercise better? Try this because we don't have a lot of time. Just find them, okay? Just find the negatives, because I believe that that works just as effectively in a short time we have. So the first one I came across, and these are fun to do on your own. You'll find a lot of them. So the first one I came across was not uniform. What would you suggest? Varied. Yeah, varied, or a variety of, or inconsistent. Not long ago. So this is a tricky one, because how far ago is not long ago? Long ago, or now, somewhere in the middle? Recently. Is it recently? Okay, you could argue with the writer about this, but you don't want to leave that in there. It's imprecise, and it's kind of hard to think about. Not long ago. What's he talking about? Oh, geez, let me go back. Okay, unpoetic and decried. False alarm. They're not negatives. These are actually different than the word that doesn't have the negation in front of it. Okay, there are not many people who have not abandoned. So what would you say? Some people have abandoned, right? Because you can understand that. There's still a not inconsiderable group who are not happy. You know, this was not, so here's a negative. This was practically found this way. We just put it in a couple of extra ones. This is from a book analyzing poetry. And they're trying to make a point. I think the point is being lost. All right. Inability to understand. You could say not, or you could say their own confusion. Right? It would not be important, it would be unimportant, or it would be careless. I don't know. And were it not that, you have to look at the sentence. It's tricky to sometimes find the right words, but that's what editors do, right? They find the words. Yeah. Yes, you could probably find another way to say naysayers if it's a negative term. What's a good word for naysayers? A positive term. Critic. Excellent. Hey, you're awesome. Step 4. My clock says we should be at step 4. I have a clock here. So step 4 is called deflate long words and break up noun clumps. You're going to like this. You get the red pen out again. All right. So almost all long words started out as short words. They grew up. They grew by accumulating prefixes and suffixes. Now, the prefixes affect the meaning. The suffixes are interesting, at the end of the word, because they'll change a word from a noun to a verb, from a verb to an adjective, and so on and so on. So you can start with a simple word like text and make it context. All right. So we have a noun called context. Everybody know the context? All right. If you add "yule," it's an adjective, contextual. If you add verb, the IZ, it's contextualized. Can we go further? Contextualization. Back to a noun. How's the mind working? I mean, if you use this word a lot, not a problem. You just read right through it. Readability doesn't assume that they know long words like that. So you can try to make it simpler. We're going to look at how to make these long words simpler because they get longer. You know, there was a point where I was between assignments and I volunteered to read for PAL, which for reading impaired people helps them with their schoolwork at university, etc. And it's good because it got me practicing talking really, really well. You can't tell, but yeah. And I think they were having fun with me because I was a newbie, and they always gave me stuff that had professorial writing with long words. And I managed to get that under my belt. And then they gave me this cinematic critique of Russian directors. That's when I stopped. Decontextualizationalist. Somebody knows what that means. The average reader will go, huh? Ism. Almost everything can be an ism. Toastmasterism. And then you put the prefixes on, and it becomes a different thing. These are just varieties, all right? So you can have a semi-contextualizationism, or a counter-contextualizationalism, and take get the point. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to deflate long words. And by deflating long words, there is an exercise here for you. You're going to find the long words so that you can peel them away to find their basis. When you do this, the meaning of the word becomes clearer, the meaning of the sentences become clearer. You'll find better words. So you peel away. So for example, rationalization, nice long word. If you strip away some of the suffixes, you get rationale. And then you think of a synonym, a rationale. And a rationale, that could be a reason or an excuse. Now you have a nice short word. If you put rationale or excuse in the sentence instead of rationalization, it might read the same, or you might need to put a preposition in there or change a verb to an adverb, but it'll be easier. I'll give you another one. Implementation. Now, if we're in business and project management, this word doesn't stop us at all. But some people, they'd like to see a simpler word. It comes from implement, which also means to do, as the verb or a tool. So you can do things, you can implement it. Imagination. Not a hard word, but there are simpler ones. Take the root, imagine, and you could substitute think or dream. I'm not saying you have to do this with all long words. Some long words are perfect for a sentence, and you wouldn't want to change them. But you get a string of long words together, and we'll talk about breaking up noun clumps, and you'll see that readability suffers greatly. Okay, deterioration. Deterioration. You can tell what the middle is, right? Deteriorate. Okay, and what's another word for deteriorate?
Fall apart.
Okay, age, breakdown. Do you think you could do this when you're editing for readability? Could you find the long words and say, what's the middle of that? What's another word for that middle? And pretty soon you're making it more readable. Superficiality. That's my favorite long word, supercalifragilistic. Question?
Why are legal documents and contracts so convoluted?
Weasel words, passive voice, and structure.
Yeah, why?
Because some court has upheld that if it's worded this way, you can't fight it. But the precedent has if a contract got through a tough negotiation, they're likely going to use similar wording in the next contract. And they just got stuck. Big words just get stuck. That's what I think. Superficiality, superficial, looks like superficial, shallow. All right. Accomplishment, accomplish. Do, exactly. You want to do something or you want to complete something. Am I going too fast? Prioritization. Prioritize. All right, when you prioritize or you have a priority, I know it's early in the morning, but you can list it, you can rank it, put it in order. They're simpler words. Your audience may appreciate that. Substantiveness. Okay, so you've got substantive and you've got substance. The substantiveness of something, okay, it's got substantiveness. It's solid. If somebody said, this has substantiveness, you could say, it's solid. Or it's significant, which is, I don't think you can make significant. Significant? Fee? No. Now, the last one, amplification. Amplify, all right. We need more amplification. Okay, it sounds like a clear word, but somebody might prefer to hear, we need to make it bigger. We need to enlarge it. We need to add gain. We need to grow it. We need more, right? Do people talk like that? We need amplification on this subject. Right? It's a way to make words harder. Okay, so take a minute. Especially at the beginning of paragraphs or sentences, you find these long words. And here's another red flag. If a writer says something and then has an IE, which that is, or in other words, or puts quotes around something, they couldn't find the right words the first time. That's what the quotes mean. It means I didn't know what the right word is, but this is kind of close, so I'm going to use this. All right. Take a few seconds anyway. Just look at some of the underlying stuff and see if any alternatives, shorter alternatives come to mind using this principle. Pull out the root. What's a synonym for that? I'll start with the first one. You can follow along or you can keep playing. So, encouragement for and promotion of. Do we like that? No. No, we don't like that. It's promote. Gets the point across. Read the next one. What's the next?
Enhanced connectivity between institutional and non-institutional.
How about enhanced connections?
Yeah.
It's enhanced connections. I think
I
know
think the whole
that.
sentence.
Okay, what's the next phrase we want to kill?
Service functions.
Manage. I like that. Next one, manage and develop instead of that long thing that's there. It's wordy. Okay, what's after that?
Utilization.
Utilization. Can you get rid of utilization? Sometimes it's important to have a big word in there, especially if you're trying to impress. You could say just use, right? Is there a difference? The dictionary says you could use it in either case. If it's a big thing, you utilize it, right? If it's a little thing, you just use it. Maybe if it's concrete, like this hammer you utilize, but this idea you use. I don't know, maybe. Depends on your style. All right, apply is a good substitute for that expression that we have there. What's the next one?
Reallocation of.
Reallocation of. How would you fix that?
Move.
Reallocate. Just reallocate. Manage is fine, and the last one, effectively and equitably instead of the automation they have there. All right. So you've figured out that long words are bad, and you can use them effectively if you want to impress, but readability suffers. Noun clumps are something that you also want to break up. Early childhood thought disorder misdiagnosis often occurs as a result of unfamiliarity with research literature. Seems like a reasonable thing to say, but that clump of nouns there affects readability. So there is a technique to fixing that, and as you go through a manuscript, if you circle the noun clumps and come back to them later, you'll find out that a nice way to deal with them is to start from the last noun and reverse their order, and you add prepositions as necessary. Let's watch how we do this. So what's the last noun? And then going backwards, disorder, then thought, then childhood. So you end up with something like misdiagnosis of disorders of thought in childhood. And in the end, you'd end up with physicians are misdiagnosing thought disorders in young children because they're unfamiliar with literature on recent research. And that's better readability. By taking that noun clump and saying, it needs some prepositions, and I'll take the nouns, and often it's in the reverse order that they're listed. And there's a game that you can play. I didn't have time for it here, but you can string 3 words together on a matrix. You just pick a 3-digit number, and you just pick 1 word from each column, and you end up with a 3-word noun clump. Noun clumps are everywhere, especially in headlines because they're short of space. Technical writing uses noun clumps a lot. You know, it's trying to be concise with their writing and so on. Okay, so this is your exercise number 7. A police intervention was necessitated because of recurrent media claims of staff security pass breach activities at Canada's largest airport. Okay, what's the first noun clump?
Recurrent media claims.
Recurrent media claims. Okay. It's a noun clump. Claims of media recurrence. Staff security pass breach activities. That's a good one. It's like, what's the game where you get points for letters on a board? Scrabble. I have a Scrabble game at home, and it's made of chocolate. So whenever I think of Scrabble, I immediately think of chocolate. I don't know. It's just confusing my mind. Should I use this piece or should I eat it? Okay. So a better way to say this was police investigated media claims of a security breach involving passes at Canada's largest airport. So you've got most of those noun clumps broken up, and it's a lot more readable. So that was an important step to readability. But it's way down here at the end, near the end. We've got 2 more steps to do, or 3 more steps to do. We've got eliminate equations and then a couple more. Again, take these 8 steps. They're at the top of your worksheet, and work through the manuscript 1 step at a time. You don't have to keep all 8 steps in your head while you're going. So if you don't have time for step 4, that's fine. It's still going to be better, but step 4 will get rid of those noun clumps. Step 5 will work with verbs. All right, we're back to grammar school a little bit here. Some of you may remember all this, and you can check your Blackberries while I'm doing it. But I just want you to know that there are active transitive verbs, active intransitive verbs, passive verbs, and equating verbs. We're going to show you examples of each one. And they have different energy levels. And if they're in your writing, the energy level is going to depend on their occurrence. Energy level 3 are the active transitive verbs. The dog bites the man. In every sentence that has an active transitive verb, you have a doer doing something to the doee. Right? And I've color-coded them. The doing is the bites, the doee is the man, the doer is the dog. You get 3 out of 3. It's got all the energy you would ever want out of a verb. But unfortunately, there's lots of other types of verbs. You've got the active intransitive verbs. You got the dog bites. And I don't mean this as, like a colloquialism. Man, he bites. The dog bites. We don't know who he's doing it to because there's no doey. So you've lost some of the energy. You've affected the readability. You can get worse than this, though. You can get a passive verb where you've got the man was bitten by the dog. You've got the doer, you've got the doey, you've got the thing that was done, but you've got them in the reverse order. And the mind has to figure it out longer. It takes longer to figure it out when you use the passive voice. Passive voice is great if you want to obfuscate, if you want to hide who's responsible for something. You can leave out who it's done to. But it's weak. If you have an equating verb, a copula verb, for those of you who remember your grammar, a linking verb, you don't have a doey, you don't have a doer. You have sentences like, the dog is the biter, the man is angry. There's no colors in this because there's none of the things you need for an energetic statement. You get a lot of writing that uses equating verbs, and they're very popular in official writing. You find out that after reading a few paragraphs, you figure, I have time for my nap. Because the verbs bring the energy to a sentence. You've got to look at these verbs, and you've got to decide, is there a lot of these be verbs in there, these equating verbs? These are the 8 equating verbs that They punish readability. You don't want to see them in your writing. To be or not to be. All right. Let me put this to a group of public speakers. You've got am in there. I am in black. Not a lot of power in that sentence. But a public speaker can say, I am in black. But you don't have that in writing, do you? You don't have someone gesturing or forcing the emphasis. So writing has to watch out for these equating verbs. We're fortunate that we only have 8 to keep track of because historically there were more. We don't have to see beest, wast, wert, and art. They're gone. These are the only 8 that are left. All right. The action is a denial of human rights. You see the equating verb? You see the is in there? All right. Can you make that active? This action denies human rights. Of course it does. Our squad has always been the winner of intercollegiate competitions. What's so great about this squad? It wins intercollegiate competitions. Always been so weak. The report is an affirmation of our principles. It affirms our principles. Of course it does. The poem was an explosion of energy. Yeah, sure it was. Shashir, how would you say this? You explode with energy. Of course you do. Nobody would ever say you were an explosion of energy. You exploded with energy. Okay. The intention of this report is to evaluate the benefits of rural gentrification. Where's the equating verb? Is. Do we know what the report does? To evaluate? It evaluates. Make it an action word. Got more. Building a library is like creating a beautiful garden. Okay, that's a simile. Don't start breaking your similes. They're beautiful. But then you start explaining the simile. Why is it like a beautiful garden? They are dependent on the application of time. What's a better way to say that? They depend on time. Neither are beneficiaries of haste. They don't like to wait. Both gardens and libraries are a result of slow evolution. It would look normal to you yesterday. Today, the R draws your attention like a moth to a flame. They slowly evolve. Right. They're not are dependent, they're dependent. They're not are beneficiaries of, they benefit from. They're not are the result of slow evolution, they slowly evolve. You don't need they are a reflection of, they just reflect. Okay, I want to go on. You have circled all the be verbs. Some of them are equating verbs. Some of them are simply passive sentences. The child was bitten by the dog. How could you say that with an active verb? It does. Next week, all tenders for the new facility will be reviewed by the committee. What will the new committee do? Of course they will. So make them say that. The resource within corporate staffing has been identified to review the plan. They have been identified to review the plan. What will they do?
They will review.
But who's the reviewer? It's a little weak. Maybe you want to go back to the writer and say, can I have the actual person who's doing it? Or maybe they don't want to say anyone right now. It's still a mystery. Issues were identified from the investigation, and the investigation actually did identify the issues. Okay. This is just a list of sentences, and I've identified the be verbs. Time, unfortunately, is out, so I'm going to leave these for your examination on your own. And we're going to talk about lead with strength, the second last step, and now we're into paragraphs. We have to look at the paragraph now, and the paragraph is important because the paragraph is what people look at very briefly before they decide, this paragraph's too long, I want to read the next paragraph. And then they read the next paragraph and they say, It's not adding anything to my understanding. I want to go to the next paragraph. Who reads like that? Liars. You skim. All right, so you lead with strength. You put the most important thing in a paragraph at the beginning of the paragraph. It's called the topic sentence. This is basic writing skills. We lead with strength. Batteries are dead. Okay, so we lead with strength. It's not, oh, we do have it. Okay, so if you're going to lead with strength, you want something at the front that is a good lead. Does it have personality? So if you're writing something and you want someone to pay attention to that sentence, does this lead have personality? Is it about the people who are reading? Toastmasters are an interesting bunch. You're going to read more when you see that because it reflects you. Topicality. First sentence might say, what's topical? May is Toastmasters month in Richmond Hill. It's topical. This isn't old stuff. I want to read more. Action, reaction. Is something happening here? A fire is burning under Toastmasters this month. It's called Toastmasters month in Richmond Hill. So readers like emotion. They like something happening. They want to know if it's about them. They want to know if it's topical. That's what you look for in a paragraph. If you can find the topic sentence, put it at the front, it becomes much easier to read. Now, I've put 4 sentences on here. Well, paragraphs, actually. Ignore that. Oh, let's say paragraphs. Okay. Petroleum pollutants are a serious environmental hazard. Sounds like a nice attention-grabbing line, right? Monday night at 8:30, there'll be a demonstration in the Science Center. It's topical. It's not really burning. Imagine never needing to buy gasoline again. Does that appeal to you? Every day it appeals to me. And you'll never run out of fuel. Well, you'd never start a whole story with an and. So if I was going to put these into a better order, what would I start with? 3 would go first. What would go last? You put 4 last?
2.
Really, this is going to be the last.
2, yeah.
2. So that's how I would put it. So if you want to write down 3, 4, 1, 2, that's how I would put it. It's called lead with strength. Put your topic sentences where they belong at the beginning, and make sure the topic sentences are really topic sentences. And lastly, in the last minute or so, the whole idea of parading your paragraphs. You parade your paragraphs by using shorter paragraphs or longer paragraphs. You string them together for maximum effect. Don't have a paragraph that talks about more than one thing. Because if you have an important point buried in this middle of a paragraph, chances are your readers aren't going to get it. If your readers are the type that just read the first sentence of each paragraph, then you want to make sure that everything is at the front of a paragraph, like the topic sentences. So if I gave you this huge block of text, I think it's in your handout, right?
Yeah.
If I gave you that, and I said, it needs to be broken up into paragraphs. You would read through it, and when you get to a point where you say, this sounds like a new subject, start a new paragraph. If they're creating a list where they go first and then second, that's a good place to start a paragraph. Okay? So you would say, in 1986, and then you say, ICI started, then they did this, first, second, and as a result. That's what I mean by parading your paragraphs. Don't let something get lost inside a paragraph that needs to be there so that they can skim and still get the entire story. So you've heard about these 8 steps now. They're actually 3 stages. The first stage, 1, 2, 3, and 4, involves shortening sentences, taking out the trash, reducing the negatives, and deflating long words and breaking up noun clumps. And I could call that reducing the effort required of the reader. We have 8 steps in total. The next stage is just energy levels. The verbs, find the equating verbs, see if you can do without the passives. And the last stage is give the reader's thought patterns a helping hand. Because they might not read the entire paragraph, and they'll get to the next paragraph and wonder, I don't quite follow. I have to go back and read it again. I didn't get it the first time. And you probably didn't get it because the paragraph was too long, and you lost interest halfway through the paragraph. So these are the 8 steps. You have them at the beginning of your handout. I empower you to give them a try. Next time somebody hands you a manuscript and asks you to improve it. You don't have to be a professional editor to provide these readability improvements. I'm happy to answer any questions or leave you with your workbooks as a job aid to further improve the readability of all the documents you handle. Thank you very much.
On behalf of District 86, Ken, thank you very much for your informative
Thank you.
workshop.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. You've been a great audience.